Hey there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. If we haven't met yet, I am Pastor Josh Pontious, coming to you from Community of Grace Lutheran Church right here in Peoria, Arizona. It is great to have you join us online, especially if it's your first time here. Welcome. You're actually coming in the middle of a message series that we started this calendar year with 2025, and we are talking about the rains came tumbling down, starting at the beginning. We're going through the book of Genesis and just exploring some of the earliest stories from the time before time, the prehistory of the Bible, and we're talking Noah and his ark today. Now, it was a little over 9 years ago now that me and my wife, Rebecca, were getting ready for the arrival of our first son, Grayson. And part of that process, as a lot of parents out there will know, is about getting the nursery ready, about getting that first room ready. You gotta pick out the furniture. You gotta get all the decorations, make sure you have all the blankets and the this and the that and the other thing, all the little toys, the knickknacks, all the stuff that goes on the walls, the painting, the art, and a lot of it you're never gonna use. A lot of it's not even safe for babies to have around earlier, but it's all just so darn cute. It's just so awesome that you can't help but buy it all. And over time, I got to say, his room today doesn't look like it did back then. It's a lot messier now. It's filled with all sorts of Lego sets and Nerf blasters and decorations from his favorite video games all over the walls. But for that very first edition of Grayson's room, my wife especially wanted us to have a single solid theme, something that went across the whole room and everything matched. It wasn't really my thing, but hey, if mommy-to-be wants it, then that's what you do. But one of the themes that kept coming up as we started to explore what the room could look like was that classic story of Noah's Ark. Now, when we made that decision, we got excited about it. I wasn't yet a pastor or a seminary student or even really considering any of that, but that story, oh my gosh, that story, what memories. It's one of the first stories that I kind of associated with my faith and with my own childhood. So we bought it all. Throw blankets and wall decorations, paintings, even this adorable little lamp that I'm sad to say did not make it through all of the cross-country moves that me and my family have done over the last 9 years. It's really sad for me. But that story, it's easy to get stuck in your head, and it's filled with all of that wonderful imagery that we just saw on the screen here, the boat and the old man and his family and all of the incredible animals marching 2 by 2 into the ark, and then the rain and the flood, and then the death and the destruction. Wait, why do we teach this to kids again? Why is this a Sunday school story? Yikes. Okay, sorry for that detour. But then at the end of it, we get God's promise to never do it again, to never destroy the world in a flood, and we get that tangible reminder of that promise, that covenant between God and God's people and to Noah and all of his descendants in that rainbow. It's beautiful. What a story. People who have never been in a church or in a synagogue in their entire lives have probably at least heard that story a couple times. People who have written off organized religion or have never been exposed to it know a lot of the details. Most of us who join online or who join us here in our services know this story, and they've probably heard it more than a few times, especially when you're younger. Now, if that's not you and all of this is new to you, then great. I'm excited to have you here. That means that we as a church, we're doing something right. That this isn't just a place for people who already know the story, who believe all of these things in the depths of our soul. That this is a place for people with questions and with doubts and uncertainties and people who have left the faith for one reason or another or who are just coming to it for the very first time. I love that about our church, that we have cultivated this environment where you don't have to be at any point in your faith journey. You are welcomed here. But that's beside the point. This story, like so many of the others that we're touching on in this series and others, they can leave us with lots of questions, even for those of us who do know the story. We ask questions like, why a flood? Why the rainbow? Were the people on earth really that wicked? Was Noah and his family the only ones good enough to be saved? Did God really need to hit that cosmic reset button and start everything all over again? And I think all of those are really fair questions, but they're not our focus for today. As usual, I think there's something else in the story. There's something that I maybe never really understood or noticed before. And I think one of the most important things that is in this story is what is not said. Now, I know all of you who are joining us online, you made sure to grab your Bible, so it's right next to you so that you can do this. So I'm sure you can all start reading Genesis right now. Start at about chapter 6 and read through the whole Noah's Ark narrative. It goes chapter 6, 7, 8, and 9. Now, thankfully, you guys who are joining us here online, you can hit pause. And so I want you to go and read the whole story. Yeah, I'm sure you've done it by now. Good. Don't worry. Take your time. It doesn't matter. I'm sure most of you even read this whole story before you even joined us online. That's fine. I love it. But if you were to read all of that, or if you just did, hey, good for you, you might notice something really interesting about the story. And it's something that, as I said, I think I noticed for the first time in preparation for this message. See, in the story, God lays out all of the problems with creation, all the problems with the wickedness of people entering into the world. God tells Noah that Noah has been chosen for this incredible task, lays out this case for the destruction of the entire world, and tells Noah to do something incredibly difficult. Not just the creation of this massive boat, not just the collection of all of these animals, but to live in the knowledge that it's just him and his family that's going to be left. This is a difficult thing physically, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually for Noah to process. This is a tough thing that God has called Noah to do. And then the rains come, and it rains, and the floods, they cover the whole earth. And the most interesting thing is, if you go and read this right now, is through all of that, Noah doesn't say a word. Not one. Noah doesn't complain. Noah doesn't try to bargain or try to find some way out of it. Noah doesn't try to convince God to pick someone else to build this ark, to pick someone else to carry on humanity. Noah doesn't try to convince God to change, or Noah doesn't come up with any excuses as to why this isn't the right thing to do. No, God comes to Noah and says, Noah, this is what you're called to do. And Noah just gets to work. Noah doesn't say a single word in the entire story until after the flood is over, until after the waters have subsided. And then it gets really funny, because when the flood is done, then Noah learns how to make wine for the very first time. He drinks way too much, ends up in his birthday suit, and in a possibly still drunk or very likely incredibly hungover stupor, ends up calling a curse on one of his sons and all of his descendants for all time. And that sounds like a really fascinating story, and one day we'll get to it, but not today. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The Bible is filled with so many incredible stories, so many things that completely boggle our minds, that I always think it's funny when people invent things that are not really in the Bible, but people assume that they're there. But aside from that, there's something powerful here. As humans, we are so predisposed to complain or to bargain or to try to get out of the tasks that are set before us, especially if they're difficult, especially if they're hard, especially if we know in our heart of hearts that there's something that God has made and called us to do. We try to get out of it. We try to talk about it. We try to negotiate. And I don't say this as someone who has an absolutely perfect track record on hearing God's call and answering what God has called me to do in my life. I knew from the time that I was about 15 that God had called me to be a pastor in a really personally transformative way. And then I proceeded to spend the next 17 years or so telling God no. I had every excuse. I had every explanation. I had every reason to tell God no, and I did. I rejected that call on my life, and I'm grateful, and I hope you're grateful that God didn't give up on me, that I know that God's not in the business of giving up on us, because if God was in the business of giving up on God's plans for us, it would have been really easy for God to go back on that promise to Noah to not destroy the world again because of the wickedness of the world. Because I think that's still happening to us now. I wouldn't blame God if he didn't want to hit that cosmic reset button on us again, because when I see the way that people treat one another, when I look at the violence and the greed of this world, when I look at children that live in homes that are filled with anything but love, sometimes I wouldn't blame God for breaking that rainbow promise to each and every one of us and just say, you know what, we're starting over again. Y'all just don't get it. Y'all are just too wicked. You're just not getting the point. You're just treating each other so awfully. And yet I wonder if some of that wickedness, some of that evil, some of that hurt in the world could all be avoided if we acted like Noah, if we just stopped making excuses, stop giving rebuttals with our words, and just listened. Listen so that when God say, treat one another with dignity and respect, we just shut up and listen to God's call. When God says, hey, go feed the hungry, that we would just stop making excuses as to why we can't or shouldn't, and we just do it. When God calls us to share our faith with someone who needs to hear the good news of the story, we don't try to talk our way out of it. We don't try to make excuses. We don't try to say, this is why I'm not comfortable with that. We just stop, listen, and then tell our story. I think there are so many times and opportunities that God places in our lives so that we can love and serve others, to make the world a better place, to step out of our comfort zones and bring transformation to the world, to take that new job, to volunteer in that new way, to be extraordinarily generous with our time and our money for individuals and for organizations that can really make a difference in this world. But we just always make excuses. We always try to talk our way out of it. I don't think we're all called to build giant boats and to try to save humanity, but I think we're all presented each and every day with the opportunity and the chance to try to make a difference. And if you haven't heard any of those calls on your life, if you really think that you're just doing everything right, or maybe that you've done it right in the past and you're past that point in your life, or now is not the season for you, you're too old, you're too young, you're too rich, you're too poor, whatever it is, I've got some bad news for you. God is still calling you into something new, into something transformative, into something that is world-changing. As an old pastor that I once had used to tell us, if you ain't dead, you ain't done. We're not done, folks. God has called us to be transformation in this world. But in order for us to be ready for that, in order for us to really live into it, we got to work on our listening. We got to stop worrying about what our answers, what our responses, what our excuses are going to be. We just start really listening and just following where this incredible journey that God is taking us on will take us. And the good news in all of that is that God's love and grace is going to be persistent in finding us either way. Our God never gives up on us. No matter how many excuses we make, no matter how many times we try to say no, no matter how many times we say, no, not right now, I'm not ready, I'm not prepared, I'm not equipped, God will keep showing up, hoping that maybe this will be the time that we will listen. God will continue to show up and remind us who we are and whose we are. And God will keep reminding us that God's promises for us are real and that God's promises are kept. And God will never leave us. God will never forsake us. And God will continue to show us incredible ways to show God's love with the people around us. So let's just stop and listen. Just listen. And maybe God will show us something new that we can do right here, right now. Amen.